Hello! After years of recording myself play Dominion, and whether it's in leagues or tournaments or just for fun, I thought I'd try something a bit different here, a bit more of a polished video. What's this all about? The problem, of course, is Tournament. With the introduction of Cornucopia and Guild 2nd Edition, Tournament has been removed from the game. Everyone rejoice, this is great. Everyone's happy about this, Tournament sucks, it was on my ban list for a reason. But now, of course, I need something else to ban, something else to fill that void. So what I need you guys to do, my audience, is to vote on this for me so I can decide what to put on my ban list next. So before I talk about the cards that I want to ban, I'm going to talk about the cards that I already ban. The first one of these is Possession. Not a very hot take. Many Dominion players also ban this card. It warps the game in a very unfun way. It makes it extra long because you're taking turns with your opponent's deck, and it has a whole bunch of rules interactions that are kind of weird and makes you think about the game in a totally different way. It's not worth learning. Nobody likes it. It makes sense on why everyone bans this card. So the next card up is Rebuild, and this might be a bit of a shock to some, considering I use this as the background for my Dominion videos, and I also use this as the background for this video. Unfortunately, the card is not nearly as good as the art. The card I find is often either monolithic, as in you fill your deck with only it and green cards and it's a really sad game, or it's absolutely useless and a dead spot on the board for where a better card could have been. I don't really know which ones are which, whether it's monolithic or useless, and I don't really care to learn as I don't like playing with either. Alright, and next up is Swindler. Swindler is probably the oldest card of my ban list, and it's also very tilting. It can do things as harmless as turning your coppers into curses, and it can also just turn your 5 costs into duchies in the early game, which is absolutely game ending. It tends to pile super fast and end the game really quickly, but it's not like a fun rush like Groom where it's actually interesting to play, and instead piles just run out and you're in sadness the entire time. And the final card on my current ban list is Cultist. Cultist is a terminal draw card that adds more terminal cards to everyone's decks. It's just sloggy, it's not very fun, it often gets out of control, and the when you trash this +3 cards reaction I wish had been used on a better card. And although we're not looking for a landscape card to ban this time, I do want to show off my ban list for my landscape cards just as some more context. The first one I have banned is Tax, because Tax slows the game down a lot and it gives a big second player advantage. It's not very fun to be first player with Tax, especially when we use it as a balancing act in League. The second one is Mountain Pass. The bidding aspect is a very interesting idea. I don't think it's done very well though, and I find that often it's a lot of debt and a lot of weird thinking that I wish would be seen in a different Dominion expansion. And then finally we have Wall. I like adding cards to my deck, especially strong ones, and I don't think it's very fun to try to limit you to a very small deck size. Alright, and now we're on to the candidates to be banned. First, we're going to start with the cards already on my dislike list to see if they get an upgrade, and then after that I have a set number of candidates that can possibly be voted on to see if they get banned, as I don't want to ban any cards that I actually like. So first up is Black Market. Black Market is a very RNG card. You often can pull a game-winning combo with it, or you can pull absolutely nothing, and it really doesn't depend on skill as much as I'd like it to. I have fun with it in about 1% of the matches I play with it, but I don't want to see it in a serious setting like League. Of course, playing treasures in your action phase is cool, but it's not the main reason that you want to play with it in the first place. Candidate 2 is Torturer, also my dislike list. Of course, it's a very powerful card, so really good if you get control of it. It's really bad if your opponent gets control of it. It can be very one-sided and often rewards the person in the lead. The next candidate is Barbarian. This card is very close to Swindler in the sense that it trashes the top card of your deck. However, it cannot be opened with unless you have a 5/2, so oftentimes it only comes into play after you get deck control, so it's a bit easier to deal with in that sense. Still not very fun, still very RNG dependent. The next card on my dislike list is Frigate. I like drawing cards, I like playing actions, I like having an engine that works. Frigate gets in the way of that. It makes it really sad, and turns out that money is probably pretty good against Frigate. However, Frigate's often kind of underpowered and can be played around. There's ways to get around it, but it's still really annoying and never enjoy when I see it. Alright, and the final candidate on my dislike list is Minion. It's one of those cards that a lot of people enjoy, but I don't really like it as I often see a good hand of 5 cards, and then someone plays a minion and I no longer have to see that hand anymore, and I'm very sad about it. I find it's just kind of repetitive and it can be a bit monolithic at times. Of course, it is a Draw to X card. I'm a big fan of Draw to X, but I like playing cards more like Cursed Village and Scholar and Library rather than something like Minion. And now onto the cards that are not on my dislike list. First up, we got Governor. Governor games are very monolithic. It's just Governor at times. Often you just do the gain gold thing, you trash them into provinces, and that's it, game over. Everything else becomes pretty irrelevant. The reason to not ban this, of course, would be that the defensive trashing is pretty fun, and there often is other things going on, but they're usually not as strong as Governor. And next up is Knights. Knights are a pile that I've had a lot of interesting experiences with over the years. When I first started playing, I really hated them, and as I grew more experienced, I tend to not care about them as much. Just recently, though, I've had an influx of nightmares where I'll take a card like Dame Anna for extra trashing, because it's one of the few trashers on the board, and then my opponent will take Knights, and then we'll destroy each other's decks, and it's no longer very fun. Of course, Knights also have the ability to not be very useful at all if something like Dame Josephine is on top, because who needs that card? Next up is another Swindler variant. It's Cardinal. Cardinal is one of those that can be opened again, so it is a bit stronger in that sense. It can be really dangerous if it hits the right thing on your second shuffle. However, it can often get things back from Cardinal from exile, and sometimes you want to skip it. Sometimes it's not that good. But often I find that Cardinal becomes your payload in certain decks, and sometimes you're just destroying each other's decks every turn, and you have to buy back things, and it's just really kind of a slog, and not very fun when you could be playing a regular engine. Next up, we got another CA card, 4 cost from Menagerie. It's Cavalry. Very different reason to ban this one. Cavalry is a really complex card, one that I don't really understand as much as the higher players do, but I definitely understand more than the lower players do. So when I encounter it against a really high skilled player, I'm often losing, and when I encounter it against a really low skilled player, I'm often winning. So it's really one of those what would I prefer kind of types, and also I like returning to my action phase. It's a cool thing to do. I would just prefer to do that with Villa. Next up, we got Black Cat. This is a really interesting one because it does have this interesting dynamic of packing your deck full of terminals in case your opponent greens, you can just draw your deck for free. However, it's packing your deck full of terminals that only draw you one card, and if you don't have a very good supply of village, your deck's probably not going to be very functional because of that. So it gets kind of this weird mess stalemate where nobody wants the green, but also nobody has a deck that works. Reason to not? Well, it's got some fun dynamics and it's a nice cat on the art, so why would you want to ban it? Next up is probably my hottest take of the entire video, Storyteller. I've talked about this before. I really don't think this card is that good, and I've stood by this. One day I'll probably make a video just like this explaining exactly why I think that, but essentially I don't like playing with it. I tend to avoid it because I don't think it's that good. However, of course, if you over-rely on it, I often can win because Storyteller isn't that good. So really it's a matter of personal preference in that case. Next up, we got another draw card that I generally don't like playing with. It's Shepherd. Shepherd, unless you have some way to top deck your Shepherd and your green cards, often is super swingy and can lead to some really, really sad shuffles. Of course, when there's ever draw that isn't Shepherd, I tend to go for it with a Village Smithy deck or whatever, and it usually does pretty well against it. But sometimes you're forced into it, so that's not very fun. However, there is the fun interaction with estates being worth more if you keep your pasture around, so that can be an interesting little dynamic there. Next up, we got Berserker. It's a pretty recent card, and it can be pretty brutal when your opponent hits 5 early and gains a card costing up to 4 and attacks you with it. However, it's still new, and Militia, the attack isn't that bad overall. It's pretty easy to get around, and often it's just another bad card in your deck, because after you gain it, it's just a Militia attack, and just worse than the Militia, which actually gives you +2 coins. And finally, the last candidate is Joust. This is the card that replaced Tournament in the new Cornucopia and Guilds expansion, but it's Tournament fixed in a lot of ways. It took out Followers, which is the most strong prize you could have won. Now they're called rewards, and so you don't have to worry about that anymore, and instead replaced it with rewards that are a bit more balanced. So there's a few that give actions, there's a few that give +buy, so you don't have to worry about that as much. There's also the blocking thing that's been removed. So if your opponent has a province in hand, it no longer matters, so your tournaments no longer get turned into nothing, and Joust is consistently a peddler no matter what point of game you're at. However, of course, it is still tournament. You still want to spike province and hit good rewards. Some rewards like Renown or Coronet or even Housecarl can be very game changing on the right boards, and so it can be a bit swingy in that sense. Okay, so you've heard them all 14 candidates here. I will let you know if one of my cards on my dislike list gets chosen. It will graduate to being on my ban list, and the card not on my dislike list with the most votes will graduate to being on my dislike list instead. I'm going to put a form in the description of this video so you can go and vote on it. You can vote for as many as you like. I'm going to do a select all that apply kind of thing. And then after a week or so, I'm going to tally up the results, and whatever happens, happens, and I'll make it official. Thanks for tuning in, and would love to see your feedback.